Welcome to the Middle of Farm Open podcast. I'm Colin Dunphy. This is the second part of my interview with Chris Vasseur, aka Coach Vass. The focus of this podcast is football strategy and how people are creating community in and around football. If you missed the first part, you can find a link in the description of this pod, or you can search for Middle of Farm Open in YouTube. Coach does a great job of talking about Washington's woes on defense, but also about how he has found helping other coaches very rewarding. In this episode, Coach Vass and I discuss how Washington is defending against the RPO, including why they are playing zone on third down. He also gives us a great breakdown on how to watch football, which is really helpful for fans. Please follow Coach on Twitter at Coach Vass and at MDGA Podcast. If you are new to Coach Vass's content, I recommend checking out his interview with Mike Kafka of the Kansas City Chiefs on his Run Vass Option podcast. Of course, please comment and subscribe to this podcast on YouTube and your podcast player of choice. My Twitter handle is Colin_WFT News. And please reach out to me because I'd love to hear your feedback and what you think of this podcast. Hope you enjoy. And I guess, so my question kind of is like on the RPOs, and I think you touched on this with Mays, and the third question is our last question from one of my best fans. I love him. His name's Mr. Who, at Mr. Who.
Hello, Mr. Who. Hopefully I can answer your question.
He just wanted to ask, why zone on third down and man on early downs? Why not man on third down?
Actually, yeah, I did talk about that with Roberts. So you're starting to see a swing go the other way with some guys, some situation. Is you play, it's the counter what everybody else is doing. And that's what a guy, for all of his flaws and just overall terrible human skills, why Belichick has always been ahead of the curve on a lot of things is, you know, I don't know if it's going to be a trend, but I think they kind of started the quote unquote trend, whether you say a trend or not, but playing man on early downs. They also play freaking man on late downs too, but you playing man on early downs because Seattle had success. So everybody tried to copy Seattle's defense, which is atrocious. And nobody, you could sit here and argue all day long. I'm sorry. I just spot dropping cover three is a way to end in disaster, even at the high school level, even at the JV level. These guys are getting so good at throwing the ball. It's ridiculous. But so the reason that you play man on first down. So these are two completely different questions to me. So I'm going to talk about playing man on early downs and zone on late downs. Those are two different things. Yes. But why do you play man on early downs is because everybody was playing the Seattle stuff. And how do you beat zone drop cover three? Over routes, boots, and RPOs.
Yes.
Now, RPOs are easier to defend out of one high because you're sitting on all the throws. Two high is where it gives problems. And that's where the RPO offense came from, was teams got really good at playing quarters. Just kind of Rivera's what he did, from what I know, this baby. Back when I was learning what he was doing 10, 15 years ago. And Del Rio did a lot of this too, a lot of quarters. And really screwed with it. And basically, because the great thing about quarters wasn't I'm having to go back to teach this stuff. I could give you a simple answer, but it's more fun to learn the context. The great thing about quarters coverage before was if they were running the ball, you did this. If they were passing the ball, you did that. Well, problem, they're doing both now. So you've just taught your players how to, they can't do both. So teams were getting into one high, and then teams were carving up and figuring out with the RPOs, especially when you're playing zone match, you're not man matching, or not, you don't never man match cover three, but spot drop three. Tried to answer that, and there's a lot of holes. And just the nature of, you have a guy that's an overhang defender out of the box, and he's buzzing them out, and there's two guys. Well, that it doesn't take a genius to figure out that's not going to be great. Mm-hmm. So how do you defend RPOs and boots? You play man and you bring edge pressure, or you defend boots by bringing edge pressure and playing man. You defend RPOs by playing man. That's the best man defense. Even Don Brown at Michigan, even when he struggled, when he had a hard time with Ohio State, and I love Don, caveat, I mean, I've had him on my podcast a couple of times, and I think he's a great coach, but I think they were second to last RPOs attempted because they played a lot of different fronts and played man. Now, you might be sitting here going, wait a minute, I thought all these Fangio guys are playing quarters. I thought you just said quarters was bad. So I'm going to answer that part of it too. The great thing that Fangio and then Staley has taken and run with it is he's figured out how to take out those conflicts. Because before it was, okay, I'm to the weak side. I'm the will linebacker. I have the B gap and I have 2 out to the flat. Okay, well, that's not good. That's conflict on multiple levels. Run pass conflict, and I'm supposed to be not only in 2 different places, but they're pulling me in different directions. So what did people do? They screwed with the ends, and they said, okay, and that was when you had horizontal, bubbles and those horizontal RPOs. We were throwing screens and all this other shit. Well, now the problem became, all right, so we're going to screw with the ends, and then we'll have the overhang play the run. Well, now they're giving them the run fake. The backer steps up to stop the run, and they just throw a slant behind it or a glance. All glances is a 5-step slant. A slant, a hitch, an in-breaking route where you vacated from. It's literally like monkey in the middle, and you're screwed. So what do? The way to win monkey in the middle is not to stay in the middle. It's to sit on one and make the guy at some point have to throw it, and then you have a shot. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So that's what Staley and them did is they covered all the inside gaps. So those backers walked out aren't in conflict anymore.
Yes.
Now I have to sit on the throw, let the safety come down from depth and play it. So that's 2 different things. So you can play the Staley stuff, but again, that's not universal. So it's kind of funny because the Panthers, who again, I mentioned are like the hot defense, they played the Jets, and the Jets lined up in a lot of formations that look similar to I'm not comparing the offenses, but similar styles to the Chargers and the Giants on some stuff. And please don't actually me, because I didn't watch it enough, nor do I give a shit enough to argue, because I get these, well, actually the Jets were in 2 backs, so 28% more. I don't give a shit. So I love you guys, and I want to answer your question, Mr. Who, but please don't. People try that with me, and I just like, yeah, you're right, and they don't get the reaction they want. But so what do the Panthers do? Is they play bear cover 1, so they're bringing guys off the edge, screaming off the edge. They have all the gaps covered up, and all their DBs are staring at receivers, so there's no conflict. Now, the Jets are terrible, so you can figure out what happened just based on all the praise that the Panthers are getting. But now, am I suggesting that's what the Washington football team does? I almost did it again.
You sound like me.
It's not a bit. This is not a bit. Like, this is, I'm not even trying to be funny. Like, you could see, like, I'm like stuttering and like, it's like, but I'm just, now it's just a matter of, can I get through the episode and finally have it conquered? But that's what you're seeing. That's why teams are playing man on early downs. And then on later downs, they're playing zone, but they're not really playing zone. They're playing fire zone. Well, fire zone is 3 under 3 deep, rushing 5, right? Well, you have to play man principles. If a team is spread out, you have to play man principles.
Yes.
If I had a gun to my head and I had to play, or I was on a team where I was like, okay, I'll hire you to be, I got a call from the Washington football. I use them as an example. And Rivera's like, hey, my nephew said you're pretty awesome. We want to hire you to be the defensive coordinator. But you have to run elements of cover 3. I would run it if they're on 2 backs or in certain formations. But when they start getting 11 personnel on 3rd down with 3 receivers, if you zone drop, there's huge ass holes. So even like and I'm using the Panthers as an example because there's some Washington 3rd down clips, but they were playing from behind. So teams were a little bit more conservative for most of the time. Now the Chargers game was a little closer, so there wasn't that element, but I think they played, were they ahead in some of those games?
They were pretty close to the Chargers, and they were actually ahead, I think, early in the game.
Early in the game? Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe I'm wrong. But the team that really throws the shit out of the ball, they were behind. And so you're also going to change your strategy. But all those teams that are running zone on third down, it's not really even zone. Like I watched, but one thing I did like was when Washington playing in some of their two deep concepts, they were playing man match, where basically, instead of playing straight two man, where you have two deep safeties and man underneath, you get the best of both worlds, where if those guys switch and pick, you can pass it off. But if they go vertical, then you stay on it. They did good on that stuff.
Did they?
And they can have success, because as long as everybody keeps their rush lanes, you can do some stuff with that front four. And because the ball's going to come out quick, teams are not going to want to have to block for that crap.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the ball's going to come out faster, so you're not going to have to cover as long unless you just blow edges or whatever, which is why that blitz I told you about where the one guy went that shouldn't have went, they probably should have flipped it or whatever. Even though they blocked all five guys,
they still got
home. And that's one of the things that a lot of people think, oh, well, if you're terrible on the back end, you should rush three. Hell no. You should rush three because of certain coverage concepts or certain route concepts that you have to defend. Rather, you should rush three because you're playing tight man coverage all game and you're near the red zone, and the plays that are drawn up are for tight windows, and then you want to zone drop, and now it changes the type of throw a quarterback has to make. But the best thing that the Washington football team can do is rush five, because when you rush five, that backer is not going to do shit anyway.
Mm-hmm,
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Those backers, and I'm not trying to be a dick, but like, they're not, unless something magical happens. Okay, you have a freakish front four, which 3 out of the 4 I know can rush the passer for sure, and I'm pretty sure the fourth one can do it too. And what happens when you only rush 4? You have a linebacker that's not doing anything. He's spying the quarter, which is total bullshit, by the way. I know a lot of scheme, and I know a lot of defenses. I can count on one hand how many schemes I've seen where there's literally a spy built in. Like a guy, this guy has the quarterback, because that's a bad matchup for the defense.
Yeah.
Because you're playing one-on-one, but that guy can go anywhere with no leverage. Like, you have no one to, like, okay, I'm going to play outside, you play inside. You can't even do that. It's just one-on-one on a better athlete. Terrible idea. But what you do by rushing 5 is you occupy the front 5. And so now you're forcing those guys to block your freaks up front one-on-one. And you're keeping in, not a lot of teams are going to protect with 5 guys against the Washington football team. They're going to have to keep the back end, or you force them by your alignment to man block. And now if he releases, it's one-on-one up front for sure. Now, here's the problem that Washington has that I kind of talked about with Mays, is sometimes when you don't have super talent, you can be more creative, and people don't get restless. Like, for example, again, using Phil Snow, and they're on the brain because I watched a lot of their film right before I watched. That was the other problems. I went from watching Carolina to Washington, and I was like, oh shit. I went from literally the number 1 to 28 in the league. So, and I know that's kind of a sore subject, I'm sure, for some
present company, right?
Too, because that's where Rivera came from. So, but when you have Brian Burns, and some other guy rushing off the edge, and you have a freak like Shaq Thompson as your linebacker, who I've watched him play high school football, so I'm rooting for him. He's a Bay Area guy. When you are the Patriots, and your money, the money that your resources that you allocate is in the back end and on your backers. That's why Belichick's a genius. And I started to go into that, but I kind of pulled away. Is Belichick realized, hey, everybody's paying these freak ass. Now this year excluded, because he went on a drunken spending spree. I think he started hitting the sauce. Sorry, I shouldn't make fun of that. But after Brady won, I think he had a meltdown and was just like, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna just spend whatever. But this year excluded, everybody's paying. The problem is, so the good thing is that Washington has a lot of good linemen, but when you're the Niners and you have one real, and I know they have some very good interior linemen, but like Bosa's the guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when Bosa goes down, you know, you're shit out of luck if you've constructed your roster around great pass rushers and average DBs. But sometimes when you have the Panther situation where you have a good edge guy, but he ain't Chase Young, who is, you can be creative and feature your linebackers. But if you have any creativity, if you're going to run these simulated pressures, which if you want to know, check out that other interview, because I don't want to retell everything and it'd be a long story. But basically in 30 seconds, a simulated pressure is I am bringing a non-traditional second or third level defender in the rush or in rush the passer or to stop the run. And I am dropping a traditional first level rusher. Well, I'm no personnel expert, but the best player on the Washington defense, I would say for my money, is Chase Young. The second best guy for my money is Jonathan Allen. The third best guy is Montez Sweat. So, and the other guy on the line is the last guy you want to drop. Yeah. So who's the nickel for Washington? What's his name again?
Right now it's Fuller.
Okay, so because they were moving him around, and in the game I saw, he was playing outside some, or maybe the numbers were also hard to see. So
yeah, it's moved around a little bit.
And no offense, but you're running a Washington media fan site, and you had to think about it. It took you a second to remember. So that proves my, and again, I'm not trying to be a dick, but like that proves my point.
Yeah.
Okay. So who is going to blitz Fuller to drop Sweat? Who thinks that's a good idea? I don't even think that's a good idea. And I'm anti what they're doing. So what do you do? Who do you like? So how can you be creative?
Right.
And if you are creative and you are dropping, it goes back to that story. I've told the story a couple of times on the podcast, but the old story, actually, this was my favorite. It got quoted in a USA Today piece. And it was like, what is it called when you see an article and it has like the quote, the pop out quote that's also included in the body?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
I was describing the Broncos rush, and my quote was, if you have Von Miller and you're dropping him a bunch, you're an asshole. And like quote, and it was like pop out. But it goes back to that old story that Bill Cowher tells when he was working for Schottenheimer at the Chiefs and had Derek Thomas. And he's like, you know, coach, we got this great play. Oh, this blitz is going to be so fantastic. We're going to sack the quarterback. And Schottenheimer's like, uh-huh. And then what? And he's like, well, we're going to drop Derek Thomas. And Schottenheimer's like, I'm sorry, what did you just say to me? And, you know, because it was like, you're going to drop our best rusher. And he's like, come up with another one. And so if you're going to drop Chase Young or Sweat, which both of them can do athletically, but if you're going to have one of those guys drop, and who are you going to bring? The guy that I've shat on for the first hour of the show instead?
Right.
Now you want to really look like an asshole, do that a bunch. So you have to be creative in different ways. So you just rush 5. And whether you're playing, because at the end of the day, whether you're playing fire zone, which is again 3 deep, 3 under zone, but with man principles. If they have 2 stand-up receivers, you have to play man, or else guys will just be wide open. And it's different to play spot dropping zone when you're rushing 3 and 4. But when you're rushing 5, the ball's got to come out fast, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be looking for that. Now you have giant ass holes. It's bad enough they're finding the holes when you're rushing 4 and they're not triggering them to throw quicker. Do you really want to rush? So my and maybe I'm contradicting myself here, and I'm not saying, let me revise what I said. The key is not necessarily rushing 5. It's occupying the 5 linemen with 5 people. Whether or not you rush that guy, or you have him be the spy late, or you cave one of the sides down so he can become a late contain guy. So he's not necessarily as part of a stunt, but it's like, hey, like we used to do this thing called flush, where we walk everybody up, we'd have 5 down, and we would literally give the quarterback the edges, the appearance that he had the edge. But those 2 backers, they weren't spies like, hey, we got to shadow him, but they were like, okay, we're closing the inside. He's going to roll. And as soon as he goes to roll, mentally, I'm already there.
Got you.
And because the backers were wider than the quarterback, we could beat him there. And so we got sometimes the effect of like a blitz with only 3 guys, because we would give up the edge, but give it up in appearance only. And those guys, it was like peekaboo. They pop out and the quarterback like, oh shit. And by the time that whole math problem's going on in his head, he's gotten sacked. By the time you're like, oh shit, I have the edge. Okay, I'm gonna start rolling out. Oh my God, there's this guy. You're done. ball's out because someone just grabbed it out of your hand. So there's ways that you can keep the back end. I mean, I could go into this for 2 hours, and I would love to at some point, but there's creative and cheap ways to keep the back end, to make him stay in protection, let your best front four guys rush, and play maximum coverage. But again, I don't think third down is the issue. I think getting to third down is the issue. And I don't know the third down. And again, there might be they're actually 25th on third down. Well, and maybe that's the case. But third down shouldn't be the issue. I could see where first down is an issue. And I don't know, in the modern NFL, it used to be, we'll just keep adding guys to the box. We can't do that anymore, because guys they'll formation you out of there. Or they'll do shit like get your tight end. And the problem is, if you play too much man, like you said, why don't you play man on third down? That was his question, right?
Yes. Mr. Who?
Go back to that red zone play I told you about, where because they know you're playing man and they know your rules, Daboll gets, or whomever's scheming that up, I think Ken Dorsey's on that staff too. Whoever's scheming that shit up has the backup tight end, or the Bills. I don't know who 88 for the Bills is. He might be their backup.
I think it was Knox.
Yes.
Dawson Knox.
Yeah. Is he the second, or am I thinking of a basketball?
I think he's the first, but I could be mistaken.
I'm crossing.
Let's call him the first to make Holcomb feel better. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get that matchup. So you got to be careful. And because you're not deep and you don't have a cadre of young corners floating around like New England and Miami does. Because a lot of that stuff, like when I was talking about Mays, was like, well, how do you do this? Well, it starts with roster construction.
Yeah.
Like they don't, this what you want to do schematically drives roster construction. Just like in college, who are we going to recruit? Well, that depends on what we want to do.
Yeah.
Where you're like, what do we got? We got to make a stew. We got to make something. We don't know what the ingredients are, because kids will jump from, the difference between a sophomore in high school and a junior in high school and a junior in high school senior. I mean, it's night and freaking day sometimes.
Really?
Where like, I don't know how much Shaq Thompson got better from last year to this year. I mean, I'm sure Sweat. I'm sure he got better, but it's not like these leaps where it's like this guy can barely put on his pads, and then the next year he's like, oh, I'm going to be all league. And you're like, Jesus, don't hurt me. Like, you don't see those kind of switches. But I think being more creative with the fronts, I think also playing less talented offenses. I mean, they played the Bills.
Yeah.
And the Chargers, they kept it. I don't think it's to beat. Here's my ultimate answer. To beat the Bills, I don't know how they beat the Bills. I don't know out of 10, the old cliche, have they played 10 times? I think the Bills beat them maybe all 10 times. Maybe they get lucky one out of those 10 or 2. But the Bills are a better football team right now. And I don't think anybody would argue with me on that. And like I said, I'm a lifelong Dolphins fan. Also why, as a side story, you also want to know why I got agnostic about the NFL was right when I graduated college, and I went to Miami. So I grew up in Orlando as a Dolphins fan, but then I was actually down there. Well, within 2 years of graduating, one of my buddies at Miami gets a job as a scout of the Bills. Vince, who I became friends with, gets drafted by the Pats, or he was already on the Patriots. He came back for like an intercession class.
Oh, you talked about him.
And then a couple years later, one of my best friends, Dwight Lowry, gets drafted by the Jets. And I'm like, and I have no connection to the Dolphins, like personally, besides like I grew up liking them. And so it's different to be like root for the home team, but if the other team loses, your friend may get cut from the team. Like that's a whole different fan experience. Yeah, that's a whole different fan experience. And then when I went to Sarah, Junipero Sarah High School is home of Tom Brady, and Brady's sending us cleats. So like, they're like the Kardashians. They wear a pair of cleats one time and it's out the garbage. So all of a sudden we have these boxers show up at the school with cleats. And then when you win the Pro Bowl, you get a chance to send a check to charity. Or one of the nonprofits he sent the money to was Sarah. So Tom Brady bought me tackling rings.
Wow.
For a second, like he didn't actually go do it, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my Dolphins fans are giving me shit. I'm like, dude, when the Dolphins buy me stuff to help me coach, like I'll go back to rooting for them in a full-throated fashion. But like, I'm coaching for a team where the stadium's named after Brady. His dad's in the office. Like, he's sending me cool shit. He's sending our kids stuff. So I can't really hate him, dude. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's another part of why I'm, agnostic on this level. And it hurts to say how good the Bills are, but they are. I mean, so they played the other two teams, I'd say tough. It wasn't a blowout. So some of the things I don't think are easily fixable, but the good news is I don't know if it's all downhill from here, but I don't know who else can I mean, who's as good as the Bills on offense? The Cowboys are apparently pretty good. I know that might be tough, but like,
we have a very hard schedule this year.
Yeah. So I know I don't want to be all doom and gloom, and I may have been like overly negative, but I mean, the good news is for the defense that it should, you're not going to play anybody as bad as the Bill or as good as the Bills, and those backers can't possibly play any worse. I mean, I can't understate how bad Davis was. Like, I honestly thought, like, is he hurt or did he get hit in the head or something? And I was like, no, he didn't have anything violent enough to get some sort of injury. And the Chargers offensive line did a really good job too. I mean, they were running right at those dudes, and Washington got some stops, and there's some good things there. Like I said, the talent that they have, if they make some schematic adjustments. And at the end of the day, Ron Rivera is a good football coach. I mean, he had a lot of success for a lot of years with the Panthers. I know at the end it fizzled out, but what's that thing? If you stay somewhere long enough, eventually they end up hating you, no matter where you are. Yeah. I mean, there are Pats fans that are pissed at Bill Belichick right now.
Right.
I think about that.
Yeah, no, I can't.
Think about that. When Alabama didn't make the finals the year LSU won, there were people that like, we should think about replacing Saban. What? The greatest college football coach of all time. I personally think Nick Saban is the greatest football coach of all time of any level, but that's just I know most people wouldn't agree with me, but like what he's done schematically, and just like, because not only does he have the best players, he has the best scheme, regardless of player talent, like just from a scheme perspective only, because you can separate the two. Like when Tampa Bay won that Super Bowl and they had all those dudes, their scheme was not. You saw what happened to it when you played with average people. Seattle, you see what happens with average people, but like Georgia's runs that defense, and they're the number one run defense for the last couple of years. And this is the first year they've had a guy that like is going to be a legit draft pick up front. But anyway, again, I'm veering off the path. So I think they'll get it right. I think the thing that made me feel better about watching them was it, and this could be a double-edged sword, but it's fixable on the back end. The backers are just going to have to play into playing better. But again, when they were lined up against, Los Angeles, and it was mano-a-mano, and they weren't in some weird formation, for the most part, they did well. It was when they were forced, and it wasn't even forced to think. It wasn't like they were blowing checks. Believe me, they got in the right check, but the checks were terrible. So, you fix that on the back end, you mitigate what those linebackers have to do. There's ways you can get them out of the game. There's ways to hide the linebackers. I mean, I don't know about hiding two of them, but you can always hide one. And so, yeah, with your safeties, or the way you play your fronts, or like if you have guys that are, if they're too aggressive, there's ways you can slow them down. If they're too timid, there's ways you can speed them up. I mean, that's something that you can help schematically. Interesting. But there's no magic wand to get them to play base defense.
Gotcha.
I think that if they get some of those checks down and scheme up some better stuff. And also, I'll say this in the defense of Washington, they played the Chargers first. That was the first time
for anyone,
that offense. So, and people kind of had a little bit of an idea what they were going to do, but even on defense, the Chargers on defense, I mean, I watched them very closely. You could have all the Staley tape in the world, but they were doing new stuff. It doesn't matter. You'd had to be a spy, during practices to know. So, I mean, I think that there's enough there to salvage it. I just don't think that I'm kind of contradicting myself here a little bit. Maybe it's because I realized I was being too negative at the beginning, but I think that there's ways and there's answers there to stop some of the bleeding. Gotcha. And if they're smart enough, they can figure it out. I just hope for y'all's sake that Ron is making more of the decisions than Jack.
Yeah, he's been a good CEO so far, and
he's healthy. He's got a clean bill of health, right?
I think so. Yeah, he seems to be much healthier and stronger. And
I was so sad because he's one of the good, and I'm rooting for him hardcore because he is one of the great guys in football. Football is a better place with Ron Rivera in it, and I know losing games can be frustrating, and I know even though you guys are 1-2 right now, and the defense has played horrible, and I know that it's easy to like fire that guy, fire this guy, but in all seriousness, like the NFL is a better place with Ron in it. And I know maybe some fans are nodding their head in agreement and going, yeah, on another team or whatever. But Del Rio, I don't have much time for. I just think I think the game is long past him by. I know I've said that now 3 or 4 times, but I mean, it was one of those things, as you watch the games, you try to anticipate what's coming next. Like, all right, this has been your adjustments. This is how they've got you. What are you going to do? And it's like more of the same. I'm like, we're just going to play man harder. I'm like, I don't think that's the answer, because it doesn't matter how good you are in man. If they're rubbing you and picking you, good luck.
Yeah. Good
luck.
That was the Chargers game plan.
Right. You better have somebody physical that can jam the front guy up so you can get the guy to play back. And, the Pats can deal with it because, again, it goes back to roster allocation. If you're sinking that much money into your front four, you have to know behind you is not going to be great.
Yeah.
It's just not. You can't have that front four. And I know 2 of them are on rookie deals. 3, are they all on their rookie deal still?
Yeah. Well, Allen was re-signed. And Ioannidis was re-signed.
I'm not thinking about it's Payne, right? Is he playing? That guy's good. 98 Ioannidis. He's awesome. I loved it when they went that 5-1 stuff. The problem is, so here's the problem. I love them up front, what they do, but the problem is if it breaks the front, you have Davis, and then you're stuck in cover 1, or you have nobody, and you're playing with those safeties, and they're good, but they're not. I don't know if they can carry. I don't know if the front's that type of front to carry them with playing like no linebackers. I put out a tweet. It's kind of funny to see teams trying to do the Staley stuff, but I don't know if Staley's going to do the Staley stuff this year in that penny package, because I don't think he has a guy in the Chargers that's Donald. Now he has a better safety than he did at the Rams, but
yes, James.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you could put that much on Allen or that much on Payne. I wouldn't play Payne there, but like to say, all right, we're going to base our defense around you being able to do what Aaron Donald does and play Derwin James from 10 yards or whatever, definitely I'm talking about the Chargers now, going back to Washington. Like, I don't know if Landon Collins can carry a team like that. Maybe he can. I don't know. Gotcha. So that's where some of the stuff I think, and I'm actually excited to see what they do moving forward on 3rd down with some of it, because they can be creative up front. I mean, and when I said you couldn't be creative, I meant by bringing different people.
Yes.
But, I don't know. I think there's cheap ways to get those one-on-ones, and they're doing a lot of it. I mean, that's one thing I will say. When it gets to 3rd down, I'm liking what they're doing. Even when it's not successful, I haven't been like, what the hell is that?
That's cool. Yeah. I like that. I mean, I like, I'm a long DC fan. Washington, I don't even know what to call us now, right? Yeah, man, I just really appreciate your perspective that you've brought and added, to my, let's say, fandom, because I can look at little things now and be like, oh, that's cool. Play didn't go well, but I think I have a little bit of idea what they're doing, and I enjoy that. So again, I really want to recommend people follow you and check you out. I had some more questions, but we've had so much fun. If you have some more questions, I know our pods go forever, but if you have any more questions, I can answer them quickly. I'll just skip to this last one because it's something that you do at the end of your pods. You have this really cool question that you ask most of your guests, and it's about how they would approach a set defensive play. And I'm going to change it a little bit because I'm trying to find out like how we can, as fans, look through, you know, your eyes as a coach and say, what could we be looking at, you know, as the play unfolds. And so that's both pre-snap and post-snap. And, you know, it can be kind of like vague, but or generalized. But for the podcast viewers that don't know your podcast, it goes like this: like it'll be 4th and 9, championship game, balls at the 35.
I usually say 35 because that's what I remember most.
And the kicker's money. Going to try and get that first down. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's a great opportunity because you get to see all these different coaches, you know, like how they approach.
Yeah.
So again, this is a fan-based pod. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that you're a fan too. You're watching this game unfold, and it's 4th and 10. And the only problem is you can't actually see what is on the screen. You're asking someone to say like, hey, what's happening now? What is that? And then just to make it kind of like even, let's just introduce a magic wand. So you can like pause. You could be like, tell me what happens now. I'm going to pause it. And then like, let's say it's like an assistant coach or somebody who
knows the game and would know the answers I'm looking for.
Yes.
Okay. Because if it's somebody who's just a fan, I'm like, what formation? And they're going to be like, what?
Right.
So the first thing I would ask for, because if it's that situation, is there any more to the question? I want to make sure.
No, I think it's, you got it. 4th and 10.
So the first thing I'm going to ask is normally the first thing I want to know is what's the personnel, but it really doesn't matter. Now, I'm going to ask some clarifying questions. Have I been watching the game up until this point and been able to see what's going on? Or is it just I don't know anything? Like, do I know who's playing? How much familiarity do I have?
Yeah,
because if I've been watching the whole game, I can pretty much tell you what personnel they're going to be in on 3rd down or money downs, where it's like 4th down, they got to get it to score or to get the first to win a championship. I won't need to know, like, I mean, it's going to be 11 or 10 personnel, meaning one back and one tight end or one back and no tight ends. But I'm just trying to decide how much familiarity I have. So how much do I need to ask?
Well, you've missed the whole game.
Okay.
You were on the road. You just get in.
Say that. Okay. Get harder. All right. Do I know? Okay. So I missed the whole game, but am I familiar with this team? Right. Literally.
Yes. It's your favorite team. It's
my favorite team.
Yeah.
Well, if it's the Hurricanes, I'm going to be like, wow, we're close to winning. We have a chance to win. So I don't know if I'd actually ask a question. I would just revel in the time that I would be shocked that we were close to winning a game with a trophy attached to it. No. So the first thing I want to know is the personnel, who's in the game. Okay. Because an offense can only do so much depending on who's in the game. Now, because it's 4th and 9 or 4th and 10, because it's the same. You're saying it's the same scenario. So my question would be, if I have unlimited time on this wand, like if it's unlimited, I'll be like, all right, who's playing where? How's the defense lined up? Are they showing pressure? How many down are they? I mean, if it's that sort of thing, I'll ask a million questions. It'd take like 10 minutes. But if I only have like the time that it takes, like 30 seconds, I'll give you what I would ask most importantly.
Okay.
So what's the personnel? So the other team I'm not as familiar with, because if it's my team's on defense, I'm not going to know unless they're playing like Alabama or something. I'll know the offense. But okay, what's the personnel? How are they lined up? Are there any tells or tips you can see where they might go to a certain guy? Meaning, okay, they're in trips, but the formations, because if you're saying my favorite team, my favorite college team, the hashes are wider. So one thing that is done more is people put formation in the boundary. Any bullshit where it's like trips in the boundary, you know they're going to go to the single side. There's buying more space. Anything weird? Is the back moving? You know what's going on? And then I'm going to ask, how are we lined up? How many down do we have? Are we showing pressure? You know, and then I'm going to want to know what the shell is, like how we're lined up, just alignment wise. And then from there, I can pretty much figure out what's going to happen depending on the team. If it's Miami, you basically just pick the worst possible outcome and you go with that, and then that's what you guess. But like if you're watching like the Falcons or something, like Peas, they'll rotate, like they do some crazy shit. It's pretty awesome. I know they haven't been great on defense, and I know they get gashed, but man, they're fun to watch. And they're there. The guys just can't make the play. Stuff that Dean's doing. And again, I am very biased, but
we're playing them this week.
Have fun. But I mean that's what I would want to know is how's their lined up, where's their best guy, what shell are we in, how are we lined up on the front end.
And when it snaps, are you watching like linebacker or up front play, or what are you looking at?
So when I try, and I don't ever do this unless I'm really thinking about it, the ADD kicks in and I'm like, where's the ball?
Right.
But if I'm being conscious and you're like, all right, Chris, you have to watch this play. So for $1 million, you have to watch one play and drop what everybody does on both sides of the ball. You get to watch it one time. You need to collect the most amount of information. Like if I'm really, really thinking about it, what I would do is, and I learned this from Steve Belichick's book, Bill's dad, on scouting methods. So I had a friend of mine, this is awful. I didn't steal it because I ended up paying the fine, but I looked like a national search. There was like 3 copies of this book, and my friend went to University of South Florida. And so I took it. She mailed it to me and I kept it, and I paid like it was something absurd, like $90 or whatever. But I paid the fine and whatever. And then of course, years later, it gets republished for like $20. Like, damn it. But he said, when you used to have to scout live, you know, and you don't have the ability of replay and iPads and all this technology, is you want to watch the center. And when the ball snapped, you want to expand your vision to collect as much data as you can from the center out. Okay. So before the ball snap, I'm going to say, how are they lined up? How are we lined up? And then this is the part that's hard to explain because everything comes in patterns. So I don't need to know where every defender is. I can take a snapshot. So, and I'll just throw out some random stuff that I look at and in no particular order. Because again, it's a snapshot. Let's say it's trips. So 3 receivers to one side the other. So I'm looking at the trips. So on offense, before the ball snapped, I'm going to look at the formation, and then I'm going to look how we're lined up, and I'm going to look at the corner. Is he pressed or is he off? Is he inside or is he outside? Can you tell? I mean, sometimes you can't. The nickel or the overhang or the Sam, usually probably wouldn't be a Sam if they're in like a true Sam linebacker. They'll be like a nickel personnel. Is the nickel outside of 2? Is he split in 2 and 3? It's really where he's only going to be. And where are their eyes? Are they looking inside, or does it look like they're in man? And then how are we covering down the third guy? If there's somebody splitting the difference between number 3 and the end man on the line of scrimmage, it's most likely going to be zone. I don't know of too many man concepts. Now you can show that, but then people can drop down. How are we covering down the third guy? Are we taking a backer and walking him out and apexing? Are we buzzing down a safety? And a lot of that I'll know by what team I'm watching. So, for example, I watch more college football, if you could have told from this interview, way more college football than I do pro football. And, like, I know some of these defenses I know like the back of my hand, like Jim Leonard at Wisconsin, who I love, and is a personal friend. I actually texted him earlier tonight and I was like, what would you do if you were in the NFL? Because I'm going on this podcast and I've been talking about this all day and thinking about it. Like, here's a guy who's going to get more offers from the NFL. You know, if he ever decides to go in, you know, what would you do basically? And overarching scheme. But if I'm watching Jim's defense, I know what he's going to do. One of 2 things. He's most likely going to spin his safety down on number 3. If I'm watching Alabama, they're going to make it look like too high, walk the backer and spin the weak side safety down. They don't spin the strong safety down much. And it's because you can't disguise out of that look as well. So I'm looking how you're covering down 3 and who's where, how deep are they? How wide is the deep safety? If you can see him in the shot, you know, is he splitting 2 and 3? Is he outside shoulder 3? Is he inside? Is he really freaking wide? And then I'm scanning to see how many backers in the box, how many guys are down. Really, that's what I'll first look at is real quick is what's the front, take a snapshot, and then my eyes go outside.
Gotcha.
And then how's the backside playing? And a lot of it is by then I've already collected enough information to know there's only so many things you can do on the backside of trips. And let's say the back is present there because you have to account for him. You know, if the safety, if they're showing 1 high, the corner is basically being man, unless you're playing like Spagnuolo or Pease or some crazy shit where they spin the nickel back and they got the weak, or Zimmers have the weak safety down.
Oh yeah.
And then he spins back and this guy's, I'm talking about more traditional stuff. There's only so much that you can do if you're showing certain shells. And then you can get a lot by the corner on the backside's alignment. The wild thing in the NFL is I can tell most of that pre-snap. And it's a lot of it's not even like trying to bait people. Like I'm going to show this very obvious look and then do something else. And that's what blew my mind. And that's what made me laugh. I'm like, everybody was like, Vic Fangio is showing quarters coverage. And I'm like, okay, so did we at Gilroy High School in 2007. I don't understand why this is impressive. Like, and I'm not trying to be like, I know so many guys that show too high every snap in high school. And then I started watching NFL defense. I'm like, oh, that's because nobody else runs too high. They're all in one high. Oh, got it. Because I remember when I sat down to talk with Robert, and I hadn't watched the Rams much when we were doing this daily thing. And I've said this on other pods, but like I met Brandon when he was a GA in Northern Illinois. He was like 20 something years old, early 20s. Because I think he's a year older than me. So he'd have been like early to mid 20s. And so I'm hearing like how much of a genius he is. And I'm like, all right, get ready to get my mind blown. And they're like, well, the first thing is they're playing quarters. I'm like, okay. And my mentor was one of the first guys to run quarters at the college level in like 1993 at USC. So I'm like, okay. And then they're like, and they're playing the bear. And I was like, okay. And the thing that was unique was they mixed the two. But then I was like, okay, what else? And they're like, well, that's really it. I'm like, and don't get me wrong. Like I said, I love Brandon. I know some guys on the staff. I wish them all the luck in the world, but I was so confused then how like this is so groundbreaking. And then I turn on a Falcons game and they're taking the free safety and the nickel or the strong safety's down over number 3 and the free safety's back. And on the snap, not pre-snap, on the snap, they are spinning them. And like the guy that's 5 yards from the ball is sprinting back to the middle third. And these like really terrible players are doing all this crazy because you have to. One thing I wanted to talk about on Robert's pod we didn't get to, but I want to talk about it here is like, maybe we did. I don't remember at this point, but like the Titans in 2018, they were 16th in the NFL and 19th. They were 11th in third down. I may have that backwards, but they were 16th and 11th. Dean retires. They go out and get 2 pass rushers. They get, I want to say Dupree and Clowney, and they finished 32nd in third down defense, over 50%, which has never been done since 2003 in a full season. Like there's teams that are over 50% now, but over a whole season, they're the only defense since 2003 in all of those years to give up more than 50% of third downs. And they had these 2 great players. I forget who the other one was. Well, it's because they stopped being creative. So I like watching these shit defenses. Like even the best Falcons fan, the most homer Falcon fan is like our defense. We have like 2 good players. But one of the first things I want to do when I turn on when I get film is I'm like, where's the Falcons film? Obviously, because I love Dean. Second of all, I just want to see what he's come up with for these because he has free runners. The guys just can't make the plays. And that's what's frustrating to me is like a schemophile. I don't even know that makes any sense, but
I love it. That's a word.
A schemophile. I just created like, I would love to see a guy like Dean with that front 4 and what he would do. Like when you've seen what Saban can do and what you've seen what Pease can do and then you see some of the shit that I saw in those games. I'm just like, let one of these dudes take over. Let them hire Matt's son or Dean's son, Matt, or hire Mike McDonald from Michigan, who was at the Ravens. I would love to see what he would do with those cats. You know what I mean? But it's the NFL. You're going to hire who you know and who you trust and, you know, who won't stab you in the back. And that's what it's about.
Well, this podcast world is awesome because you can just go listen to your stuff anytime, and your Patreon is just awesome. I really love it. I think everyone should check it out. I think Deontay Lee said, he's like, dial it up as you kind of like it, There's lots of different levels, and so I think that's really cool. And, all the stuff what you're doing with Coach Tube and Huddle, just so many different ways to, support and learn from you. And I think that's what, for me, as a Redskins fan, damn, that got me doing
it. You did it. Wow, I'm glad I'm not the only one doing this.
No way. Yeah, so like it's just way more ways to enjoy the game, and I think that's awesome. And I really appreciate you leveling and like being so forthcoming in this podcast, like about you as a person, because that was actually it came later in my kind of journey, if you will, like being a part of this community, this fan based community. I'm sorry, the fan community, but also like the content creator community. It's just been like really fun, and another way to enjoy the game. So I really want to thank you for that.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. I know we went for a very, very long time, but I like talking football, and once you get going on something, especially because I'm like, you know what? I had to suffer watching that shit. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to make it worth my while. I'm going to get my money's worth for time spent watching, the time spent talking about it. But no, in all seriousness, like, and I told you this the other day, but you seem like one of the genuine good guys doing this. And I'd say most of the people on here are, but, you seem like you're doing it for the right reasons, and you really care about, the listeners and the viewers, and want to put a good product out there. And so I'm honored that you would consider me, being such a young show, that I would be one of the guys that you'd want to have on first. So hopefully I didn't drive anybody away. No. With our 2.5 hour talk, but I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for your time.
Not at all, Vass. I really appreciate it. And hope to talk to you soon. And for all the viewers, is there anything else you'd like to say? There's the Coach Vass at Coach Vass Twitter account.
Yeah, that's the best place to hit me up. And a lot of stuff like I do, like for Coach Tube, you mentioned, it's coaching exclusive stuff in the sense that like it's defending the wing tee. It's not even stuff that's related to pro football at all. I mean, if you're curious, I mean, I have a course up about developing a third down package, pressure and coverage, and defending RPOs, but it's geared for people that want to put stuff in. It's very college heavy. So when I do stuff like this and people are like, hey, what do you want to plug? I'm like, well, if you want to check out the podcast, but being very honest with you, there are barriers to entry in the podcast. If you don't know much about scheme and you think you're going to pick it up and start just, follow along and not get frustrated. But one thing I realized early on was, especially with coaches now, it's true with fans, but it's a lot more true than I thought it was going to be, because my whole thing was with coaches is if a coach doesn't understand something, and that's where this all started with, was to help coaches. And then I realized, hey, there's these super fans that want to learn this stuff too. And then I started meeting with journalists who had a bunch of questions. And then I realized they were all listening. And then people were trying to figure it out. I've never seen a halfway decent football coach, see a concept and be like, that's too hard to learn. I'm not even going to bother learning it, because especially when you coach defense, you got to keep up with the Joneses. If you decide I'm not going to learn that, somebody else is, and they're going to do it to you. And if you don't have an understanding of it, like a lot of the shit that I learned for football, I don't want to learn. I don't particularly want to, like, to be honest with you, when I was learning a lot of the 3-4 stuff, wasn't super excited about it at first, but if I'm going to help people, and I knew it in pieces, but to learn it systematically, but like how to, 4x1 passing game and stuff, it wasn't something I was super interested in. But when you coach, or when you're in my position now where you're advising coaches, which is even worse, because if I screw up and I come up with a bad idea and I screw up, it's like, all right, well, I'm an idiot, like whatever. But somebody pays you to help them and then you screw them up, it's like shit. You feel like a real scumbag. But that's why I never offer money back guarantees. No, I'm totally kidding. But you put this stuff out and you study this stuff because you have to, whether you like it or not. Now, offense is not the same. Like there's stuff you can ignore on defense, but I don't know. Maybe that's wrong. Like, a lot of it is you don't have a choice if you're in this world. So because of that, people they take it as like a challenge. Well, I don't know what he's talking about, but I'm going to figure it out. And I thought that would kind of be the barrier to entry. But there's been a lot of guys that, people reach out, like, I understood. And I'm not saying this is like some badge of honor, but I listen to your podcast and I understand like 10% of it. And my answer was like, well, did you turn it off? And so I listened to it 3 more times. And I'm like, what? Like, it's got to be one of the podcasts that has the highest like replay rate, because we assume, and I put in the show notes, one thing as a young podcaster in your time doing this, some advice is, because I didn't do it originally, was show notes. So if there's something you're listening, because I understand a lot of people listening to pods in the car and stuff, where if you just remember what we were talking about, you can look in the show notes, have the timestamps. And if you're going to do this on YouTube, it's even better because you can directly link it. Where mine, you have to kind of look and then fast forward. But if you set it up on YouTube, is this on YouTube?
Yeah.
Perfect. So then you can actually link the timestamps so people can click it. Now, I thought at first, was nervous about doing that because I don't want people just to skip through the episode. But whatever, at least they're listening. But what happens, people will be driving, they'll be like, I don't know what he's just talking about. Because you also have to run a show. You can't sit there and be like, okay, and then the center's here. Okay, and then the guard is here. Like, I would throw the radio out the window if if it was the case. So you kind of have to listen multiple times. But that's what's so cool about this community as a whole, is they'll be like, I don't understand that, but I want to.
Yes. Because
whether you, and I'm not trying to be a dick, but like to anybody, but like whether you understand what's going on or not, it's going to happen on Sunday. And so, and like I said, ignorance is bliss. There are sports like I purposely did not learn anything about. Not purposely, but it's nice because I can just say irrational shit and think I make all the sense in the world and think I could do better. And it's fantastic. And I live in bliss and nobody can tell me any differently. And I bury my head in the sand. But if you want to learn, because here's my only sales pitch for you guys. I have a couple of pro coaches on, but it's mostly college guys. But that's where defense is coming from now.
The pros.
That's where it's coming from. They're coming from the pros. It's coming from college. So the secret to Brandon Staley was that he did a bunch of college shit.
Oh, got you. Yes.
So this is coming up. So you might say, well, I don't watch college football, especially like around the DC area. Who's the good college team? Catholic University. I mean, seriously, like who's the best? I mean, the Maryland's
doing better now. Yeah.
But that's still, I mean, so I know that DC is not like a huge college, or they are, but it's like Notre Dame or Penn. Like I have friends in DC. Notre Dame, Penn State, and Florida State. Nobody even close. I guess Penn State's close, but you can learn from these guys and learn these concepts because it's trickling up.
I see.
It's going up now because offense has gone up from college. And then now defense to combat it is going to have to come. And it's funny because I've seen some guys that didn't bother watching any college football or talking anything in college. And you could tell because they're trying to solve the problems in different ways. And they're not doing a good job because they've only had to think about this shit for a year. Like if I had to do something, even if I thought this person was inferior to me in terms of my knowledge, I would go talk to the guy who's been thinking about this for 8 years instead of coming up with something on my own.
Right.
And you could tell the teams that are like just bullshitting through it.
Yeah.
Because it would be like, it would be a shame to like a pro guy to go study from college.
Yeah.
That's why, adapt or die. That's why Belichick and the Reeds are still around because, Andy Reid hired a college liaison Brad Childress, all he did was watch college film. Because the NFL was stale with offense. He recognized that. He goes, how do I get a leg up? What's the easiest way to get a leg up? Change our scheme. It's really hard to be successful in drafting. Look at the Raiders. They drafted that kid fourth who's done nothing, Farrell. And then they got some guy in the 4th round, Max Crosby, looks like he's the next damn, John Randall. Like, well, shit, so it's hit or miss. Pioli used to keep a picture of the 5th round draft pick that he picked before Brady to keep himself humble because it's a crapshoot. Now, if you've got Chase Young, yes, that's a kind of a not a miss pick. But there's been guys that were supposed to, there's been tons of guys that were can't miss picks that are not doing well, that didn't do well. Mm-hmm. And so what's the easiest way to get advantage? Hire good people and scheme.
I could go on for this, but like, I think kind of what you're doing now with this podcast in a way is a part of like a newer revolution of like just information dissemination. I maybe that's for our next podcast. We could talk about how that could, impact the future, because there's, more money coming into the sport. There's more athleticism, over the past 40 years. Rules have changed. You've talked about that on the Mina Kimes, but like, that's not I guess like my thing there is like, it's just, I wonder, like the cliche is like, all right, everything's a cycle, but I feel like there are also one directional processes that are happening to the league. And one of them is like rule changes. And so like, it's never going back to like running. And in my, I don't know. Unless the rules change.
It won't go backwards. The only thing that'll go backwards is like the taunting rule. Like you're going back to shit in the 70s where like, maybe you can't celebrate anymore or whatever, but
right.
The evolution of offense, because here's the thing with the NFL is, and maybe I'm contradicting myself a little bit from what I said earlier, but only at lower levels can you take advantage of like, oh, everybody's going nickel. I'm going to do what Harbaugh did at Stanford and just mash people. Mm-hmm. Because there will always be somebody bigger and stronger than you. Always. There's always going to be, or if it's not, they're very close. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Like Mater Dei and St. John Bosco are the two best high school football teams, and they're like a half hour from each other, and they keep pushing each other every year, but they're so far head and shoulders above everybody else, but they still have each other. And so you can only do that. We're going to be bigger, stronger, more physical. And then you get to a certain level, like in competitive areas in football, in high school, those gimmicky, like double wing, I'm not talking about the flex one option, but like double tight, double wing, like scrum offenses. You can do that shit, but until you play like an SEC defensive tackle, it just detonates your front. You don't even have to be good at scheme. But that's the problem with going back to that world in the NFL is, you get these freak athletes that can just stop one side of the line and, Now, again, it's all about resource allocation. The difference between college and high school and pros is at the end of the day, everybody's got the same amount of money they can play with. So if you invest all your resources into your offensive line, well, your quarterback's not worth a shit. So if you get in a third down, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. Or what are you going to do on defense if you can't stop anybody to have that style of game to play, like run the ball and play great defense? Well, what happens when you play Tom Brady and he can get an empty and jumps up on you 14-0, or somebody that can score fast? What do you do? I don't know. So I think you're right. I don't think it's going to go backwards, but lower levels have gotten better at throwing the football. So people say, oh, well, the pros went to college style offense because colleges weren't developing pro style quarterbacks. So they had to just go to the college style. Well, colleges have more time with their players than the pros. So if colleges have all this time and they're doing this, why don't you do it too? And I think that's what Andy Reid saw is like, when everybody's in the gun. I mean, look at who is the best under center team in America in college in the last 15 years? Alabama, right? Their quarterbacks were shit until they did what? Until they went to the spread, because nobody wanted to fucking go there and hand the ball off to Mark Ingram 27 times. You know what I mean? So that's the other thing of it is colleges, they're going to be more exciting because they want to recruit kids, because all it takes is one guy to be like, we're going to be exciting and fun. And then even Alabama started to struggle, and they said, hey, we're going to have to keep up with everybody else. And they switched and they adapted, and them who had all the advantages and were winning all the championships, even they suffered.
Yeah.
And that's why Alabama's been more successful as Georgia, because I think Alabama has revolutionized on offense. I don't think Georgia has. I think Georgia's still trying to play that style of offense. But anyway, back to the pros is once the floodgates open, and yeah, Mahomes is fantastic. And I don't know if there's going to be anybody in a long time that's like him, but he also was the third quarterback drafted. And I personally, and this is to keep myself humble, I texted my buddy at TCU when he got drafted, and I was just laughing because the only time I'd seen him play was against TCU, and he was terrible, awful. So I was like, are you serious? They traded up to get him. But look at 2 other teams pick people in front of him. One guy is already on another team that didn't draft him. And the other guy, for personal reasons, isn't even playing right now. Watson. Wasn't Watson in what's his name? He was in the same draft as Mahomes, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. So, yes, Mahomes is fantastic, but he also had Andy Reid grooming him. He also had, I mean, we could see what a head coach and an offense does. Look at Sam Darnold. Again, they've played some bad teams, but they beat the shit out of the Saints, who seem to be pretty good. You know, so I don't know. But
yeah, I think
the football team of Washington needs the quarterback situation settled before anything else. We haven't even talked about that, but
and every fan, well, every super fan, and I think fans in general and the sport in general will benefit from what you're doing to like share this information. I think I mean this is kind of like my closing kind of like thought, but I think it's awesome because it seems like a lot of those schools and of thought, we talked about this in the pre-interview. It's like you go learn under a school of teacher, and it's kind of like a martial arts, you know, the school like I learned my crane technique, you know, with Alabama, you know, and it's like, well, now everyone can learn the crane technique. You know what I'm saying? And so what does that do to the level of MMA, you know, for the world? And it's, you know, I just think it's an inspiring, cool thought, and I'm happy that you're doing it.
I appreciate that. I tried to, like I said, I tried to move the discourse. I tried to, you know, pick it up and get it moving forward. And it's trippy because there have been colleges that have visited each other because I had them as a guest on the podcast and got to know the guy, and then just told somebody else how great they were. And then these 2 teams got together, Division I football teams, top 25 teams. Like, that's very cool. That's the power. I mean, you talk about like a cool feeling.
Yeah.
Now, if they had been shit and my recommendation would have been terrible, but I put them on this guy's radar. I know more, you know, I have friends that coach in the NFL and they listen to the podcast, listen every week. So it's cool that there's something like, I don't know how much, because I had Mike Kafka on, the quarterback coach from the Chiefs. I had him on the Run Vast Option podcast. I don't know how much Mike actually learns from listening, but he thinks it's entertaining enough to listen. And this guy is going to be an NFL head coach one day. And then I have guys that literally know almost nothing about scheme, and guys and gals are listening, and they're able to be entertained enough, or the information tickles their fancy enough where they're trying to learn. And that is very, very cool to see, to know that there's coaches in the NFL listening and people driving their kids to school that have never thought about putting together a pressure scheme are listening, and information's traveling faster. It happened to me in a very tangible way. Back in 2017, we ran Dave Aranda's version of the tight front in a state championship game. It was against all of our rules. It was the dumbest decision I ever made, but it worked out. We did everything you're not supposed to do, which is throw your defense out before you play in your biggest game. So that off season, I was like, we're going to put in this tight front. We're going to do this. And I went to BAM, and I went to Georgia, and I talked in Tennessee, and I went and talked to all these people. Then everybody ran the tight front in 2018, and offenses already had their counters prepared. I'm like, shit, I thought I was at least going to get a year or 2 out of this. What the hell? And then the tight front guys were like, yeah, we're getting out of the tight front. Everybody's doing it. I'm like, what? Like, I just sold out to this shit. Like, it's going too fast. So that's what's been interesting, is you're starting to see concepts. And that's kind of where I'm going next. Is I want to start, I don't know how much I want to talk about this, but I want to start a consulting firm with someone in particular where you meet with teams in season. So they're not learning these new concepts in the off season. I want the information to travel faster. Hey, what are guys doing? Because it's easy. Anybody can go, any QC, quality control, any intern, next gen stats people can go see in the off season when you have a shitload of time and you don't have anything to do that day, and go study what happened last year. But that doesn't help you as much as you get a jump on the shit now, especially before bye week. Hey, we're struggling with this. Who's doing this? Bam, this team's doing this, and this team's doing this, and this team's doing this. And you have like this consulting thing. That's ultimately what I want to do.
That's cool.
Help guys in season. That's the flagship. What I do on Patreon this time of year is Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Coaches from all over the country come on and we problem solve. Hey, we're seeing this team. They do this. What do we do? Hey, we got this going on. What have you done before? And now it's getting to the point where some of it's redundant because I'm either sharing stuff that I've done. Well, there's only so many things that I've done, or I'm, hey, you're a 3-4 team. Well, we weren't a 3-4 team, but I know this guy does this and this guy does that. Or we bring on a guest if we can, and they try to troubleshoot with us. And that's my favorite part of the week, is because it's all well and good to teach somebody in April what you should have done last year. But now you get to have an impact now.
Yeah.
You asked me, bringing this full circle, you asked me, what's my favorite thing? I'm selling this. And this is not a sales pitch, because this is not something that any of you, unless any of you guys are defensive coordinators that have to play the wing T, but I have a coach tube course on the wing T. I'm able to sneak in a commercial on my own podcast and be like, hey, if you guys want to stop the wing T, I had a guy, he bought my wing T course. And I put a lot, like most of those courses, like $40-50 like an hour. Mine's like 8.5 hours. Like, as you can tell, I struggle with brevity. And he texted me and said, this team, we got a running clock put on us the last year. They were beating us by more than 35 going into the fourth quarter. We shut them out this year. Same team. That, to me, I was more fired up and excited about that than most of my own personal wins over the years. That fucking fires me up.
That's awesome.
So if there's anybody I can help, my final pitch, I don't know if anybody's still listening to my rambles by now, but if there's anything I can do to help you, find me on Twitter at Coach Vass, or really the best way to do it is follow me on the at MDGA podcast account, because I try to follow everybody back, and then you can just send me a DM. But my whole thing, everybody's like, why don't you open your DMs? Like, listen, if I'm going to give you free advice, the least you can do is follow me. Okay. And I'll follow you back, and then you can ask your question. But, you know, damn it, at least I get a follow out of this. So in all seriousness, hit me up there, and I'm always available to talk. Obviously, we're almost hitting hour 3. We're starting hour 4.
Right.
So,
well, I've had so much fun, and I really appreciate everything you've done for me, and you continue to do for coaches and fans, and you know, the sport as a whole. Hope to talk soon.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Colin.
Take care, Vass.
Okay, that's it for this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to Coach Vass for participating. Again, please comment, rate, and subscribe to this podcast. I would love to know what you think. Thanks again.